She didn't just mean the wheel, she meant everything. And I wasn't sure if I was ready to follow. The first time she appeared in my life, it was entirely unplanned, the kind of moment that catches you off guard and lingers in the memory long after. I was sitting in a small, slightly worn coffee shop, one I had passed countless times but never entered. Rain drizzled against the windows, leaving tiny rivulets that distorted the view of the street outside. The air smelled faintly of roasted beans and wet pavement, the kind of scent that makes mornings feel quieter and heavier all at once. She walked in just as I stirred my coffee, the bell above the door announcing her presence like a soft punctuation. There was a quiet confidence in the way she moved, graceful but unhurried, as though she owned neither the space nor needed anyone's approval to exist within it. Her hair caught the soft morning light, warm chestnut streaks brushing lightly against her shoulders. She wore a simple sweater, nothing extravagant, but it hugged her in a way that suggested elegance without trying. Even across the room, I noticed the subtle curve of her smile as she greeted the barista, an effortless warmth that made her approachable yet intriguingly distant. She ordered, and as I returned to my notebook, I caught a glimpse of her hands that seemed used to responsibility and care, fingers with faint lines that spoke of experience, of life lived thoughtfully. And then, without warning, she spoke. Not to me, not to anyone in particular, just casually, but in a tone that made the words land differently. "Stop talking, just drive," she said, half laughing, half serious. It was so ordinary, so casual, that I almost dismissed it. Yet something in the cadence, in the way her eyes briefly met the reflection of herself in the coffee shop window, made the sentence linger in the air. It wasn't just about driving. Something beneath it, a teasing, perhaps, a challenge, or maybe a quiet command to simply move forward, made my chest tighten. I found myself wondering what she meant, not just about the literal wheel, but about her life, her pace, and the spaces she moved through. I returned to my notebook, but my pen felt heavier, my thoughts pulled toward her without permission. The ordinary background of steaming mugs and low conversations faded. My curiosity wasn't just about her physical presence, though she was undeniably striking in a way that felt refined rather than flashy. It was something deeper, the sense that this encounter was a beginning, a quiet ripple that would grow into something I didn't yet understand. As she turned to leave, umbrella dripping lightly, I noticed the small details that people usually miss, the way her coat shifted with her movement, the soft click of her heels, the faint, almost imperceptible sigh as she stepped back into the drizzle. And in that moment, I realized that life had just nudged me in a direction I might not have chosen on my own, toward someone who would challenge, intrigue, and perhaps change me entirely. Her words, her presence, and that casual command, "Stop talking, just drive," stayed with me long after she disappeared from sight. It was the kind of moment that asks a question without offering an answer, the kind that lingers in the spaces between breaths, and I knew instinctively that I would be chasing it, however unknowingly, for a long time to come. It started with a simple offer, a lift. She didn't ask, didn't hint, and didn't insist, but when the rain had begun to fall harder, her umbrella collapsing under the wind, I found myself holding the door open without thinking. She stepped inside the car, shaking off droplets from her coat, and suddenly the confined space of the vehicle transformed into something quietly electric. The first few minutes were awkwardly mundane. The hum of the engine filled the gaps in conversation, punctuated by raindrops tapping rhythmically against the windshield. Yet even in silence, there was a tension I couldn't ignore. She shifted slightly in the seat, her hand brushing, almost imperceptibly, against mine as she adjusted her scarf. The warmth from that fleeting contact lingered, a gentle reminder that proximity could speak louder than words. Her presence was comforting yet disarming. I noticed the subtle gestures, how her fingers occasionally traced the edge of the dashboard, or how her eyes lingered on the passing streets with a quiet curiosity that seemed to drink in everything. There was a maturity in her gaze, a calm confidence that contrasted sharply with the nervous flutter I felt in my chest. I wanted to say something clever, something that would bridge the invisible gap between us, but instead, I found myself stealing glances in the rearview mirror, marveling at the way her hair caught the soft light filtering through the rain-streaked windows. And then she spoke, breaking the tentative silence, her voice low but steady. "Stop talking, just drive," she said again, this time, with a smile that hinted at playfulness beneath the surface. My fingers tightened slightly on the wheel, my heart skipping a beat. It was impossible to tell if she meant it literally, or if there was some subtle challenge woven into her tone. Either way, I felt compelled to obey, to let the car glide forward while keeping my focus split between the road and the small, intimate world beside me. Every glance, every subtle shift in posture, carried weight. When she leaned forward slightly to adjust the temperature, our elbows brushed. The touch was brief, accidental, yet it left a warmth that pulsed through my arm, lingering like a promise. Her perfume mingled with the scent of rain and leather, an intoxicating blend that made the hum of the car feel like a private sanctuary from the outside world. Conversation began to flow in short bursts, observations about the weather, fleeting comments on street signs, small stories about childhood neighborhoods. Yet underneath, a rhythm developed, a silent understanding that neither of us was in a rush. Pauses were comfortable, glances were loaded, and every unspoken thought hovered in the space between us. There was a growing awareness of desire, not in a brazen or hurried way, but in a subtle magnetic pull, a tension that lingered in shared smiles and the brush of hands. By the time we reached her destination, the rain had softened into a gentle drizzle. Neither of us spoke much as she stepped out of the car, but the lingering warmth of her presence remained, an invisible tether that made the drive back feel emptier than it had before. Her words, her touch, her quiet insistence to just drive had transformed a simple act into an encounter that resonated far deeper than I could have imagined. That first shared drive wasn't just about moving from one place to another, it was a beginning. The road had become more than asphalt and rainfall, it was a space where emotions could grow quietly, where connection could be felt in glances, brushes of skin, and the unspoken understanding that sometimes, the best way forward is to simply let the journey carry you. It happened on a quiet afternoon drive, the kind where the street seemed to belong to no one but us. Rain had stopped, leaving the world glistening with fresh reflections, and the hum of the tires against wet asphalt created a gentle rhythm. She didn't speak for a while, her gaze fixed on the passing scenery, hands folded loosely in her lap. I could sense something in her shifting, a subtle tension that hadn't been there before, and instinctively, I knew she was holding something back. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, she began. Not a story of triumph or success, but of quiet regret, of a fear she had carried for years. There was no dramatization, only honesty, the kind that makes your chest tighten in recognition of someone's humanity. I watched her closely, the way her fingers twisted a small ring on her hand, the faint tremor in her voice when she paused to gather herself. Vulnerability had a texture, and it radiated from her like warmth that seeped slowly into the car's air. I didn't reach for words immediately. There was no need. She was sharing a piece of herself, and I felt honored, aware of the delicate trust she had placed in me. The quiet of the car, the soft hum of the engine, the occasional passing car, the muted rhythm of the city outside, wrapped around us like a protective cocoon. And then, almost unconsciously, my hand brushed hers. Not a gesture meant to fix or console, but simple, grounding, a small acknowledgement that she wasn't alone in her thoughts. The contact was brief, yet electric. I could feel the warmth of her skin, the subtle pressure as she adjusted her hand slightly to meet mine. It wasn't forward or presumptuous, but intimate in a way that words could never convey. The way her eyes softened as they met mine, the faint tilt of her head, the slight exhale that followed, all of it spoke of trust, of a tentative opening that demanded care and patience. We didn't rush. We allowed the silence to breathe between sentences, letting the small gestures, a hand resting on the console, fingers brushing against each other, a lingering look, carry the weight of what was unspoken. There was a pull, quiet but insistent, that grew with every shared secret and subtle smile. I found myself wanting to linger in the moment, not because of desire alone, but because the intimacy was a rarity, a connection that felt fragile and precious. Her voice eventually grew steadier, the vulnerability transforming into something lighter, almost playful, as if sharing had released a burden she had been carrying alone. And yet, beneath it, the magnetic pull remained. I sensed it in the warmth of her hand still lingering near mine, in the small, unguarded glances that spoke of curiosity, trust, and something deeper that neither of us named aloud. By the time the drive ended, I realized that this wasn't just a ride through streets or neighborhoods, it was a journey through layers of self, a slow unfolding of who she was beneath the poised exterior. And in that slow, deliberate unveiling, I understood that connection isn't measured in words alone. It's felt in the spaces between them, in subtle touches, shared silences, and the courage to show vulnerability. That afternoon, I had glimpsed the depth of her, and I knew, quietly, irresistibly, that I wanted to explore it further. After a few drives together, the tension between us began to shift, softening into something lighter, more familiar. The earlier hesitations didn't disappear entirely, but they started to mingle with a warmth that made even ordinary moments feel significant. One afternoon, we found ourselves on a quiet, winding road, sunlight breaking through lingering clouds, illuminating the wet asphalt in soft gold. It felt like the perfect moment for playful distraction, and she took it. She challenged me to let her choose the music for the drive, her fingers brushing the edge of the radio as she scrolled through options. "No complaints," she said lightly, a small smirk tugging at her lips. I tried to object, teasing her about her taste, and she laughed, a clear, resonant sound that filled the car and made my chest tighten in that familiar, delicious way. It wasn't just amusement, it was a reminder of the magnetic energy between us, the subtle pull of shared joy. Our conversation danced between observations and small debates. She questioned my choice of route, joking about my reckless sense of direction, and I countered with teasing commentary on her music selection. In these playful challenges, I noticed details I had missed before, the delicate line of her jaw as she laughed, the way her hair caught the sunlight, the gentle warmth radiating from her shoulder whenever she leaned slightly closer. Every gesture became a conversation of its own, unspoken yet deeply communicative. There were moments when our hands brushed, adjusting the map, reaching for a water bottle, and even when brief and accidental, the touch carried weight. I could feel her warmth seep into me, her subtle presence anchoring me in a way I hadn't anticipated. There was no urgency, no need to define the moment, the simple contact, the shared laughter, the stolen glances were enough. The road itself seemed to fade away, leaving only the quiet intimacy we had begun to cultivate. Between laughter, she shared small anecdotes about her life, clever observations, memories tinged with humor and vulnerability. I found myself leaning closer, hanging on every word, noting the slight hesitation before she revealed something personal, the way her eyes softened as she spoke. And when our hands met briefly on the console while reaching for the same cup of water, the touch lingered longer than necessary, a silent acknowledgement of connection. By the time the drive ended, the playful teasing had transformed into a deeper, unspoken understanding. The tension that had once pulsed quietly between us now had room to breathe, to evolve into a comfort that was both tender and charged. The warmth of her presence, the music, the laughter, all of it left a subtle imprint on me, a feeling I knew would remain long after the ride was over. Shared laughter had become our secret language, a way to connect without words, to explore closeness in small, safe doses. Every playful challenge, every teasing glance, every accidental brush of skin reinforced something undeniable: this connection was growing, quietly but powerfully, weaving desire, trust, and joy into a single, unspoken rhythm. And in that rhythm, I realized that our story wasn't about rushing towards something inevitable. It was about savoring each small, meaningful beat, each laugh, each glance, each fleeting touch, letting the connection grow naturally, until the tension became a kind of beautiful inevitability. It was one of those drives where words seemed unnecessary, the kind of silence that hums between two people who understand far more than they admit. The rain had returned, softer this time, falling in a steady drizzle that blurred the world outside the windshield. The engine's gentle hum and the occasional swoosh of wipers became the backdrop for something heavier, more intimate, brewing quietly between us. She sat close, not intentionally pressing herself against me, yet the confined space of the car amplified every subtle gesture. The warmth of her shoulder radiated toward mine, and for a brief moment, I felt my pulse quicken, aware of the gravity in the air that had nothing to do with words. A slight tilt of her head, the way her fingers lightly rested near mine on the console, or the brief catch of her gaze in the rearview mirror, each gesture carried weight, a tension that was magnetic but carefully restrained. We didn't speak, yet there was communication in the pauses, in the shared glances that lingered a heartbeat too long. I noticed her breathing slow when she realized our hands were momentarily close, almost touching, and the soft exhale she released seemed to acknowledge the unspoken. Every movement, every small touch, felt deliberate yet effortless, as if the car had become a private world where the outside didn't exist, and the rules of society were muted by intimacy. The phrase she had first said, "Stop talking, just drive," now echoed differently in my mind. It wasn't about the road anymore, it was about letting go of hesitation, about following the pull between us without forcing it into words. I felt her awareness of the space we shared, the way she allowed herself to be present yet distant, daring me to take note, to acknowledge the undercurrent of desire without overstepping. Even the ordinary sounds, the patter of rain, the low hum of tires, the faint music from the radio, seemed charged, accentuating the tension. I found myself acutely aware of her scent, the soft warmth of her scarf brushing my arm, the subtle way her posture shifted when she leaned slightly toward the window or toward me, almost imperceptibly. Every detail pulled me deeper into the moment, leaving me suspended between longing and restraint. The silence eventually became an unspoken agreement, a shared understanding that we were on the edge of something neither of us wanted to rush, yet neither could ignore. Our hands brushed again, this time longer, a fleeting contact that said everything words couldn't: curiosity, desire, hesitation, and the acknowledgement of trust. By the time the drive ended, the tension hadn't resolved, but it had matured into something richer, a quiet anticipation, a magnetic pull that promised connection while demanding patience. I watched her step out of the car, raindrops clinging to her coat, and felt the invisible tether between us grow stronger. That drive wasn't about movement on the road. It was about the slow unraveling of restraint, the recognition of desire in subtle glances and touches, and the shared understanding that what was building between us was significant. In the silent exchange of warmth, fleeting touches, and unspoken glances, I realized that the story wasn't just about attraction. It was about the tension itself, the delicious, patient, and irrevocable pull that would shape every moment to come. It was late evening when it happened, the kind of hour where the city lights blurred in the reflection of wet streets and the world felt softer, slower, suspended. We were parked on a quiet stretch, the engine off, letting the car sit in stillness. Outside, the rain had tapered into a gentle mist, the air cool and scented faintly of wet asphalt and distant streetlights. Inside, there was a warmth, hers, that seemed to fill every corner, pressing gently against my awareness. For a long moment, we simply existed together in silence, each of us wrapped in our own thoughts but connected by proximity. Her hand brushed against mine as she adjusted her position, and this time, neither of us moved away. The contact was deliberate, but not demanding, a quiet acknowledgement that we were both aware of the tension, the curiosity, the desire that had been building between us. Then she spoke, her voice lower than before, softer, with a vulnerability that caught me off guard. Not playful teasing this time, not the gentle commands to "just drive," but honest words spilling from her heart. She talked about her fears, the judgments, the doubts, the careful walls she had built around herself for years. I listened, noting the slight tremor in her fingers, the way her eyes flicked to the side when she admitted something particularly personal, the quiet exhale that seemed to release a fraction of her tension. I didn't interrupt. I didn't rush to comfort or to solve. Instead, I let the space hold her, letting my presence, steady, patient, attentive, speak. And when I finally reached out, my hand covering hers on the console, she didn't pull away. Our fingers intertwined lightly, a simple touch, yet one that carried the weight of trust, intimacy, and acknowledgement. She looked at me then, really looked, and I could see the vulnerability behind the composed exterior, the quiet longing that matched my own. "I don't know what this is," she admitted, "but it feels like it's something I've been avoiding, something I didn't think I deserved." Her words were soft, but in them was the quiet force of truth, the kind that changes everything. I answered honestly, matching her sincerity. I told her about the curiosity and warmth I felt, about the draw that went beyond attraction and touched something deeper, respect, admiration, fascination. The age difference, the societal expectations, the internal hesitations, we acknowledged them all, but rather than letting them create distance, they became a shared truth, a reality we could navigate together. The car became our sanctuary, the outside world fading into irrelevance. The quiet moments, the lingering touches, the subtle brushing of our arms, the shared glances, every detail reinforced what we had both been feeling but had been too hesitant to say. It was a slow-burning revelation, not a sudden spark, and that made it all the more powerful. By the time we drove again, the tension had softened into a rich, warm closeness. Our hands remained near, our glances lingered, and the air between us hummed with quiet understanding. The breakthrough wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud. It was a delicate, beautiful acknowledgement that the connection we had nurtured, through touches, drives, laughter, and shared silences, had evolved into something honest, mutual, and deeply compelling. The final drive felt different, though nothing had changed outwardly. The rain had stopped entirely, leaving the world polished and glimmering in the soft evening light. The hum of the engine was steady, familiar, almost comforting. But inside the car, there was a new rhythm, one forged by trust, quiet vulnerability, and the slow, undeniable pull that had been building between us. She settled into the passenger seat with the same graceful ease as always, but this time there was a softness in her posture, a subtle relaxation that spoke of comfort and confidence at once. Our hands met briefly on the gear shift while adjusting the temperature, and neither of us moved away. The contact lingered, warm and grounding, a gentle confirmation that the closeness we had cultivated was mutual. Words felt almost unnecessary. Instead, there was a series of small gestures that conveyed more than sentences ever could, a lingering glance in the rearview mirror, a faint smile that curved at the edges of her eyes, the brush of her fingers against mine as she reached for her bag. Even the quiet exhale she let out as she rested her hand lightly on my arm carried meaning, trust, desire, and the comfort of knowing we had crossed the threshold from hesitation into mutual understanding. We didn't need grand declarations. The shared silences spoke volumes. The warm glow of the dashboard reflected in her eyes, the soft scent of her perfume mingling with the fresh evening air drifting through the window, and the gentle sway of the car as we moved along the streets all became part of an intimate, private language. It was a language of presence, of attention, of small touches that mattered infinitely more than words. By the time we reached her destination, there was no awkwardness, no lingering doubt. She stepped out of the car, paused for a brief moment, and turned toward me. Our eyes met, and in that simple exchange, everything was understood. A hand reached out instinctively, and she allowed it to rest lightly on my shoulder, a gesture of connection, a quiet affirmation that this was only the beginning of something deep and meaningful. Driving away, I felt a sense of completion, not the end of a story, but the start of a shared journey. The tension, the laughter, the vulnerability, and the quiet intimacy had all converged into a warmth that lingered far beyond the car, a feeling that promised patience, respect, and a deep, evolving connection. This wasn't about rushing toward desire, it was about savoring each moment, each glance, each gentle touch, and understanding that slow-burning love could be just as powerful, maybe even more so, than anything immediate or loud.